At the outset, I must congratulate Prashant Bhushan and Tipangi who have organized this timely, very relevant topic on a very relevant topic. Invited the former judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court and other panelists to discuss an important topic which is being debated in the entire country and in the world over on the subject draconian laws, dissent, democracy. Should the UPA and sedition have a place in our statute books? Therefore, we, the law-abiding citizens, defenders of the democracy, protectors of the human rights, the people of this country, from bottom of our heart, congratulate the organizers. And I must also congratulate Anjali Bharadwaj, having coordinated this program. Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, once made a significant observation on the reconciliation of civil rights and liberties with national security in the context of the fight against terrorism. I quote, "We should all be clear that there is no trade-off between effective action against terrorism and protection of human rights. On the contrary, I believe that in the long term, we shall find that human rights, along with democracy and social justice, are one of the best prophylactics against terrorism," unquote. A people-centric model of national security is the quintessential need of the hour. Massive reforms are necessary in the special security legislations prevalent in India today, as they reek of an authoritarian impulse, which is dangerous in a constitutional democracy. Legal reforms are imperative. The legal provisions of the special security legislations that accord impunity to state excesses need to be repealed. Stringent guidelines are to be framed for exercise of these powers. The judicial interpretations on these special laws in recent times have been erratic and situational. There is an imminent need for clarity on the overarching principles of the law in reconciliation of the conflict between human rights and the national security. The Supreme Court judgment in Watali case, reported in 2019, needs to be addressed. Section 43D5 of the UPA bars the grant of bail if, on a perusal of the case diary and in the opinion of the court, there are reasonable grounds for believing that the accusation against such person is prima facie true. Therefore, the UPA restricts the role of courts to examine the case of prosecution while considering grant of bail and precludes bail if the prosecution's version, without being subject to the rigor of cross-examination or challenge, appears true on the face of it. In Watali, the Supreme Court further held that it was not permissible for the court to even engage in a detailed analysis of the prosecution case while considering bail under the UPA to weigh whether the evidence adduced by the prosecution was even sufficient or not. Effectively, while the statute itself limited the role of courts to have one-sided view only of the case of the prosecution in its determination of the question of bail, the Watali judgment tied both hands of the defense by effectively prohibiting any substantial challenge to the case of the prosecution. The grant of bail is rendered almost impossible until the end of the trial, which could take generations. A wholly unconstitutional interpretation of the UPA that strikes at the root of the fundamental right to life, personal liberties, and speedy trial guaranteed under the Constitution. Fortunately, there are several judgments that have attempted to harmonize the human rights and national security. The Honorable Supreme Court of India, in the case of Union of India versus K.A. Najib, judgment dated 1st February 2021, Chief Justice N.V. Ramana, the Justice Suryakant, and Justice Aniruddha Bose have held, I quote, the presence of statutory restrictions like Section 43D5 of the UPA per se does not boost the ability of constitutional courts to grant bail on grounds of violation of Part 3 of the Constitution. Indeed, both the restrictions under the statute as well as the powers exercisable under the constitutional jurisdiction can be well harmonized, whereas at commencement of the proceedings, courts are expected to appreciate the legislative policy against a grant of bail, but the rigorous of such provision will melt down where there is no likelihood of trial being completed within a reasonable time. The records of the cases against whom the cases are pending, it varies. 12 years in Ahmedabad case, the trial was concluded. Thousands of people were acquitted under the Terrorist Act in the year 1985 Act. Such an approach would safeguard against the possibility of provisions like Section 43D5 of UPA being used as the sole metric for denial of bail or for wholesale breach of constitutional right to speedy trial. Speedy trial, Supreme Court right from 1979 has been repeatedly laying down the law that speedy trial is the part of the life includes livelihood. This is being blatantly violated even in respect of the cases filed against the accused persons under UPA and the sedition law. Unquote. In the above judgment, the apex court also refers to the orders enlarging similarly situated accused under the UPA passed earlier by the apex court in Angela Harish Sontakke versus State of Maharashtra, 2016 Supreme Court. That was also a case under sections 10, 13, 17, 18, 18A, 18B, 20, 21, 38, 39, and 40 subsection 2 of the UPA Act. This court, in its earnest effort to draw balance between the seriousness of the charges with the period of custody suffered and likely period within which the trial could be expected to be completed, took note of 5 years, incarceration, and over 200 witnesses left to be examined, and thus granted bail to the accused, notwithstanding Section 43D5 of UPA. Similarly, in Sagar Tataram Gorke versus State of Maharashtra, reported in 2017, an accused under UPA was enlarged for he had been in jail for 4 years, and there were over 147 witnesses unexamined. This is very relevant. The exceptionally stringent provisions of UPA, which render the granting of bail extremely difficult, are meant to apply only to exceptional cases that fall within the narrow ambit of the legislative intent behind special laws like UPA. They are not intended to replace ordinary penal law. This quintessential distinction between the state of exception and the state of normalcy has been compromised by laws such as the UPA. whose ambiguous and broad provision allow state instrumentalities to invoke and apply them indiscriminately and thus keep people behind bars for years without trial. Unfortunately, it has now become a weapon against dissent to take in several democratic dissenters as prisoners of conscience. A sacrosanct principle of interpretation of penal provisions is that they must be construed strictly and narrowly in order to ensure that a person who was not within the legislative intendment does not get roped into a penal provision. It follows as a corollary that the stringency of provision warrants an equally stringent construction. Some principles that could inform a jurisprudence that accords due deference to civil rights even within the restrictive confines of the UPA can be culled out from certain judgments already delivered on the point by several high courts and the apex court. Number one, the operation of special security legislations like UPA designed to deal with specific exceptional circumstances must be restricted to such cases and their operation should not be blurred with ordinary legislation. Two, criminal statutes must always be narrowly construed and their terms given due specificity. Three, the word terrorism in the UPA must be given specific meaning that relates to the defense of India as a sovereign nation, which must be distinguished from public order offences. Public order issue must not be colored with seditious motives. In order to establish prima facie case of terrorism under UPA, again an accused, the allegation must be individualized, factual, and particularistic. Needless to say, there must be no scope for speculation in the objective determination of actual facts. Speculation or inference should not inform the determination of a prima facie case under the UPA and discharge the prosecution's prima facie burden under Section 43D5. If the actual facts devoid of speculation render such burden undischarged, normal principles of speculation, normal principles bail under general and penal procedure should apply. Yet another grave issue with special security legislation like the UPA, APSAPA, etc., that lay down standards for permissible departure, derogation of civil rights and liberties is the lack of accountability and sometimes de facto or worse de jure impunity to agencies of the state for any and every action taken in discharge of their duties under such laws. While general penal law requires prior sanction to prosecute a public servant for an alleged offense committed by him or her when purporting to act in discharge of their public duties, some special security legislations like the UPA grants blanket protection by imposing complete bar on prosecution in such cases. Section 49 of the UPA Act. The consequences of vesting such unbridled power without any accountability in the state instrumentalities is dangerous for a constitutional democracy, as it sets the stage for enabling excesses by the state with impunity. With great power comes great responsibility. It is high time that the state is vested with that quintessential responsibility to harmonize civil and national security by appreciating the fact that neither is subject to a trade-off under any circumstance is a constitutional democracy. This is my view on this, the aspect of the topic which is assigned to me. I am of the view that the courts, merely because there is a restriction, I don't think that provision cannot take away the constitutional power of the constitutional courts. The constitutional courts have got basic power, that is the judicial review power as held by Supreme Court in a 9-judge bench case, and which has been subsequently followed in Bomai's case. That is, basic judicial review is the basic structure of the Constitution, and the human rights are being violated. Indiscriminately filing cases against the persons who have expressed their dissent shall not be allowed to languish in the jails. More particularly, Stan Swamy was hailing very salient. Both the state, NIA, and the courts have failed to take into consideration that he was entitled for bail on the medical grounds on such stringent terms and conditions. That has not been done. That has made him to die in the hospital. This aspect is very alarming, and the all right-thinking people, but more particularly the judges of the Indian courts, district judiciary, the constitutional courts, must take note of this important aspect of the matter, interpret the provisions, and does not say that we have no power to deal with this kind of cases where the vengefully the cases for having expressed their dissent and filed the cases made them to languish in the jails. These are my views. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.